The lion, the elephant, and the gorilla the day the jungle stood still the sun was not a sphere in the sky that afternoon. It was a bleeding wound, spilling a thick amber light across the Savuti plains, turning the tall parched grass into a sea of jagged gold. The air did not merely hang over the earth, it pressed down with the weight of 1,000 unspoken tragedies, smelling of sun-baked dust, the ghost of a distant rain, and the sharp metallic tang of a predator's breath. In the center of this vast, silent theater, 3 shadows converged. It was a sight that should have been a symphony of violence. A lion, a gorilla, and an elephant standing within the same breath of wind. The lion, a massive male with a mane like burnt mahogany, did not crouch. He did not extend his claws or ripple the muscles of his shoulders in the ritual of the hunt. His eyes, usually the cold color of ancient honey, were wide and glazed with a shimmering, liquid vulnerability. Opposite him, the gorilla, a silverback whose back looked like polished slate under the dying light, sat not in a posture of defense, but in one of profound, quiet mourning. His massive hands were pressed flat against the cooling earth, feeling the vibrations of a world that seemed to be slowing down. And between them stood the matriarch, a great elephant whose skin was a map of a century's worth of journeys, her trunk hanging limp, her ears not fanning the heat but draped like heavy velvet curtains against her skull. There was no sound. The cicadas had ceased their rhythmic grinding, and the wind had died in the throat of the acacia trees. The natural world had broken its own laws. Predator and prey, forest and savanna, the small and the monumental, had found a common ground in a moment so heavy with grief that it felt as if the very rotation of the planet had paused to bear witness. This was the day the jungle stood still, a day when the instinct to survive was replaced by something far more terrifying and beautiful, the instinct to comfort. Before we journey deeper into the heart of this impossible gathering to uncover the secret that brought these 3 kings to their knees, I want to take a moment to welcome you to our circle of storytellers. If these stories of the profound, invisible threads that bind all living creatures touch your soul, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. It helps us continue to give a voice to the silent wonders of the wild. We would also love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from right now? And what time is it as you join us in this sacred space? Your presence here is a testament to the empathy that still exists in our world, and we are honored to share these stories with you. The setting of this miracle was a place where the edges of the world blurred. The borderlands where the dense, humid embrace of the Congolese rainforest met the sweeping, sun-scorched reaches of the southern plains. It was a landscape of contrasts, smelling of damp orchids and dry earth, a place where the morning mist tasted like sweet water and the midnight air felt like cold silk. For years, this region had been monitored by a man named Elias, a researcher whose skin had been tanned to the color of old leather and whose eyes had spent so much time tracking the horizon that they seemed to hold the reflection of the entire continent. Elias did not just watch animals. He breathed with them. He knew the lion, whom he called Tao, not as a killer, but as a sovereign, who had once protected his pride with a roar that could vibrate the marrow in a human's bones. He knew the elephant Thandi as the keeper of the forest's memory, a matriarch who could find a hidden waterhole by tasting the moisture in a breeze 10 miles away. And he knew the gorilla, Kalu, as the silent philosopher of the high canopy, a creature who spent his afternoons watching the clouds with a gaze that suggested he understood the transience of all things. The bond between these 3 was not physical, but geographic and spiritual. They shared the same water, walked the same ancient paths, and respected the invisible boundaries of each other's domains. There was a peace here, a fragile equilibrium built on the slow, patient language of existence. Elias would sit in his battered jeep, the scent of wood smoke and stale coffee clinging to his clothes, and watch as the world turned in its rhythmic, predictable cycles. He saw the way Tao would lead his pride to the river, the way Thandi would guide her calves through the thickets, and the way Kalu would watch them from the safety of the tree line. It was a world of order, where every heartbeat followed the drum of the seasons. But the sanctuary was not as impenetrable as it seemed. The crisis began not with a bang, but with a whisper. a shift in the atmosphere from the earthy scent of life to something sour, anxious, and hollow. It started with Toe. The great lion began to wander away from his pride, his gait no longer a fluid, rhythmic march, but a staggered, uncertain shuffle. He would stand for hours at the edge of the forest, staring into the dark green shadows, his mane matted with burrs and his ribs beginning to trace sharp lines beneath his sunset-colored fur. Then came Thandi. The matriarch, who had always moved with the deliberate grace of a mountain, began to lag behind her herd. Her trunk, usually a tool of infinite precision, became clumsy, dropping the acacia branches she tried to strip. Her eyes, usually clear and observant, were clouded with a film of exhaustion that looked like the gray mist of the rainforest. Elias's desperation grew with every sunset. He called in teams of veterinarians and experts, men and women who spoke in hushed clinical tones about viral outbreaks, neurological failures, or the possibility of a rare airborne toxin. They looked through binoculars, their faces grim, and took notes on the deteriorating clinical signs. They spoke of lethargy, of motor function loss, and of the breakdown of social structures. But Elias felt a different truth in his gut. He could smell the acidic scent of pain coming off the great animals, a sharp, stinging odor that hung in the humid air, defying the perfumes of the blooming flora. He felt a crushing helplessness, the kind that comes when you watch a masterpiece being erased and realize you have no way to hold the brush. The forest itself seemed to mourn. The birdsong became sporadic and shrill, and the trees seemed to droop under a weight that had nothing to do with the lack of rain. The experts searched for a physical cause, poking at the earth and testing the water, but the animals were not suffering from a disease of the body. They were suffering from a disease of the world. The situation reached its breaking point on a Tuesday, a day when the air was so heavy with moisture it felt like walking through a warm, shallow sea. Tao, Thandi, and Kalu had all converged on a small, neutral clearing, a place where the forest met the plain. It was here that the hidden physical truth was finally laid bare. As Elias watched from a distance, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, he saw a fourth figure. It was a young lioness, Tao's favorite daughter, lying in the center of the clearing. She had been caught in a poacher's snare, a cruel, jagged wire that had bitten deep into her neck. But that was not the revelation. The revelation was the way the other animals were reacting. Kalu, the gorilla, had brought a handful of medicinal leaves, herbs that his kind usually used for their own wounds, and was placing them near the lioness's head. Thandi, the elephant, was using her trunk to gently blow cool dust over the young lioness's feverish body, her movements as tender as a mother cradling a newborn. And Tao, the father, the predator, was standing guard, not just for his daughter, but for the gorilla and the elephant who were helping her. The mystery of their behavior was not a lapse in instinct, it was a higher application of it. They had recognized a shared enemy, the cold, mechanical cruelty of the snare, and in a moment of cognitive brilliance born of sheer agony, they had formed a cross-species alliance. They understood that the wire was not of the forest, not of the earth. It was an intrusion of the other, and they had suppressed their millions of years of evolutionary rivalry to face it. The why was finally clear. The animals were not just reacting to pain, they were reacting to injustice. They were showing a technical and emotional precision that mirrored the highest human virtues. They had gambled their safety on the hope that their collective presence would create a sanctuary of mercy. The resolution was a slow, beautiful symphony of healing that felt as if the earth were finally exhaling. Elias and the rangers moved in, their footsteps muffled by the soft, rotting leaves of the forest floor. In the past, Tao would have charged, Kalu would have thrashed his chest, and Thandi would have trumpeted a warning that could be heard for miles. But that day, they stayed. They watched with an eerie, synchronized stillness as the humans cut the wire, cleaned the wound, and administered the antibiotics. There was a moment, just as the wire snapped, when the entire clearing felt as if it had been struck by lightning. A sudden, sharp release of tension that sent the birds into a frantic, black-winged retreat. Over the following weeks, the healing was not just physical. It was a process of reconnection. Elias watched as the young lioness regained her strength, her sunset-colored fur growing back over the scarred tissue. The first moment of physical reconnection was a sight that would leave seasoned trackers weeping for years to come. Tao approached the lioness, his massive head rubbing against her shoulder in a rhythmic, low-frequency purr that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Thandi stood nearby, her trunk draped over the lioness's back in a gesture of silent protection. And Kalu, the Silverback, watched from the edge of the shade, his amber eyes no longer burning with judgment, but glowing with a profound, quiet recognition. It was a moment of synchronized breathing, a physical release of the heavy, humid promise of pain that had held them all captive. The air felt lighter, the acidic scent of pain replaced by the sweet, intoxicating fragrance of the blooming wild ginger and the cooling, rain-washed earth. The bond was no longer just one of shared space. It was a bridge of shared survival. A testament to the fact that when the world becomes dark enough, the light can come from the most unexpected places. This story leaves us with a philosophical legacy that transcends the borders of the African wilderness. It forces us to confront the reality of animal intelligence and the depth of their emotional landscapes. Tao, Thandi, and Kalu did not act on simple instinct. They acted on a sophisticated understanding of cause and effect, and more importantly, they acted on a sixth sense of love and trust that we often reserve only for our own kind. It teaches us that empathy is not a human invention, but a universal language spoken by any heart that has known fear and found comfort. It suggests that there is a collective consciousness in the wild, an unspoken vow of mutual respect that can override the hunger of the predator and the fear of the prey when a greater threat emerges. The unspoken bond between these three kings serves as a testament to the fact that when we strip away the noise of our civilizations, we are all just creatures of the earth, seeking safety, seeking connection, and looking for a hand, or a trunk, or a paw, to hold when the snares of life tighten around us. It is a reminder that the wild is not just a place of survival of the fittest, but a place of the survival of the kindest. The day the jungle stood still was not a day of paralysis, but a day of profound movement. A movement of the spirit that showed us that even in our most destructive moments, the natural world carries the capacity for a grace that is both ancient and infinite. As we leave the sun-drenched plains and the emerald mists behind and return to our daily lives, let the image of the lion, the elephant, and the gorilla remain with you. Let it remind you that every living being has a story, a struggle, and a capacity for connection that we are only just beginning to understand. Thank you for walking this path with us today. If the story of Tao, Thandi, and Kalu touched your soul, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder of the magic that still exists in the wild. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another journey into the heart of nature. Before you go, we want to ask you, have you ever experienced a moment where an animal seemed to understand your emotions or the emotions of another creature on a level that felt almost human? Was there a time when a pet or a wild creature showed you a sixth sense of intuition or mercy? Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and your stories help us build a bridge between our world and theirs. Until next time, keep your heart open to the wonders of the world. And remember that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply stand still and listen to the heartbeat of the forest.